Hello, this is my history presentation project for ECCE 1101, Intro to Early Childhood Care and Education. My name is Danielle Twitty, and I will be narrating this presentation today. The topic of this presentation will be on American Indian boarding schools, also known as the boarding school tragedy. These boarding schools came about in the late 19th century, and their purpose was to assimilate Native American children into modern Americans. The belief was that because there was no more land west for the Indians to be pushed onto, that instead of fighting the Native Americans, we would instead give them an education and assimilate them into our culture. In the picture to your right, you can see a large group of Native American children who've been sent to one of these boarding schools. The history behind the Native American boarding school. In the early 1800s, the first Native American boarding school came about in an attempt to erase Native American culture. They were used as a method of forced assimilation. The end goal was to force the Native American to be like the white man and to forget his cultures and traditions. In the picture to your left, you can see the three Lakota boys. They are some of the first attendees of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School circa 1900. In the first photograph, you can see that they are dressed in the traditional clothing of their tribe. In the second photograph, you can see that their hair has been shorn and their clothing has been replaced with clothing typical of a white American during this time period. This is just one example of forced assimilation. There was also a 1902 haircut order that forced other Native American men to cut their hair in order to receive rations from the United States government to help feed their families during a time when food was scarce. Boarding schools for Native Americans. The belief behind these boarding schools was kill the Indian in him and save the man. Richard Henry Pratt said that. Richard Henry Pratt opened one of the first boarding schools for Native Americans called the Carlisle School in 1879. Over 200 Native American children died there. The Carlisle School was used as a model for more than 150 other Native American boarding schools across the entire country. The Carlisle School closed in 1918, but discriminations against Native Americans continued until 1978 when the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed by Congress in the United States and is still prevalent today. In the picture to the right, you can see a group of Native American children in a classroom setting, and a teacher is teaching them how to read and write. Inside a Native American boarding school. Initially, the government forced many Indian families to send their children to boarding schools, but later, Indian families chose to send their children there because there were no other schools available to them at the time due to discrimination. Upon arrival, children were stripped of their traditional clothing, given a haircut, and had their name changed to something more English sounding. They were told to never use their native language again. Most children arrived not even speaking English and were punished any time that they used their native language. Their religious beliefs were nullified and they were forced to follow Christian teachings. A lot of Native American religion is based upon nature. They were told this was evil and wrong, and they were told that they must follow the teachings of the Bible and Christ. Schools were rife with infectious disease such as tuberculosis and the flu. And as I stated in an earlier slide, over 200 children died at the Carlisle Institute alone. In the schools of the Native Americans were taught how to read and write, math and science, and then skills such as mending and sewing, cooking, and metalworking. The idea was that even though a lot of children had come already knowing these skills, that the skills they had learned were inadequate and they had to be retaught how to do it appropriately and in the white American way. The Indian Child Welfare Act. Until 1978, it was common practice to remove a Native American child from his or her family and place them into a family of another culture, predominantly white families. Native American mothers were deemed unfit and their homes inadequate. The Native American mother was considered a savage. These children were removed because people genuinely believed that children in the care of a Native American mother would also become savage. After 1978, the child's tribe was given say in the education and placement of children from their culture. In 1990, the Native American Language Act was passed, giving Native American children the right to learn the languages of their and histories of their ancestors. Most Native Americans agree, though, that this is too little too late. As a direct result of the Native American boarding school, there are many Native American languages that have completely died out or are in the process of dying out because they've been completely forgotten. Racially based separation of families is still a problem today. In 2016, the Department of Health and Human Services stated that Black and Native American children were overrepresented in the welfare system. The effect of the Native American boarding school. The boarding schools left a lifetime impact on the lives of the students who attended them. Native Americans who attended them were told they were inferior to the white man and that their culture and beliefs were backward and evil. This led to a loss of language, culture, and irrevocably damaging the Native American history. Native Americans suffered low self-esteem, loss of identity, and loss of cultural, history, and tradition. Suicide is a major problem in today's Native American youth. The rate of suicide for a Native American youth between the ages of 15 to 24 is 2.5 times more than the national average. Once these children return home, they struggle to relate to their families. Through breaking the bonds to culture, they broke the bonds to each other. Students who survived these boarding schools were marked by trauma for the rest of their lives. The impact of Native American boarding schools on education today. Native American boarding schools set an example of how cultural discrimination and insensitivity can damage an entire people. From these experiences, we have learned that there are many correct ways to raise a family, and there are many culturally acceptable ways to raise a child. There is no one right method to educating, and all children should be made to feel welcomed in a classroom. Adaptations can and should be made for children from different cultures. These boarding schools are proof that you just can't erase a person's history, and that by robbing a person of their history, their culture, and their beliefs, you injure their being and their identity. Though we still have a long way to go as a nation, we've acknowledged our injustices and have tried to become more culturally sensitive to people of every background and culture. In education today, we make many attempts to be all-inclusive for all cultures. We take classes to help us better understand different people and different traditions. We model our classrooms with words and pictures from different languages and cultures, and we read books and stories from all over the world. We learn about the family units of all different cultures and strive to get the most information we can in order to help all children be successful. The tragedy of the Native American boarding school will never be forgotten. And though we can't erase our own history, we can learn from it. These are the sources that I used for my presentation. History.com has a lot of really good information on this topic, as well as the childwelfare.gov, which had a lot of good information about the Child Welfare Act. All of these sites are very, very informative, and if you have a spare moment, I definitely suggest reading more into this, especially if this topic interested you. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.